Welcome to this edition of Getting to Know You, a series of interviews I'm having with members of the Essex Association where we get to know a little bit more about them, their ringing careers and what they enjoy doing outside of ringing. Today, my guest is Steve Nash. Hi, Steve.
Hello Vicky.
Hiya, thanks for joining me.
No worries.
So, Steve, let's kick off. Introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do within the Essex Association.
I was moved back to Essex in 1985. I wasn't really born and bred in Essex, although actually I was born in Romford, so there's a little quirk. Born in Romford, moved away, moved back to Essex in 1985. Joined the Essex Association as a result of appeal at Ingrave that John Harpole organised. I actually seen the minute book quite recently, so it's quite interesting reading what was in the minutes of the meeting around there. And the actual, what I do at the moment is I'm actually now been promoted to tower captain at Langdon Hills and Fobbing because Catherine Corns has had to stand down. I'm also the Southern District Deputy Master at the moment. What else? And I'm a Life Vice President as well of the association.
What's a Life Vice President?
Yeah, it's a good question. The Life Vice President is, as far as I'm aware, and I've obviously been involved in knowing what the association does and how its inner workings go on, is for the people who've done a lot for the association over a large number of years. And this is like an award which is given at the AGM, I think it was 2014 that I received mine. So I got nominated by John Harpole. That's strange, isn't it? And someone else, and it goes towards the AGM. I have to walk outside and stand in the cold or the sunshine, and then people vote on whether they think I'm worthy of such an award. And I was very honoured to be nominated and successfully pass the requirements.
So what would you say, what is the role of a Life Vice President? You say it's in recognition of work you've done for the association. Is there any expectation now that you are a Life Vice President?
Well, when I was Association Master, the Life Vice Presidents were really the stalwarts of the association who'd had the most experience and usually had an awful lot to talk about, which is works both ways. So it means I can stand up in the management meetings and witter on, but I try not to do that. It's about experience, I think, is what it's about, and offering, what we used to do in the old days type of questions, which I know we've touched on before or come across in meetings. It's about continuity and making sure that the association is in a healthy state. As we are members, Life Vice Presidents are members of the management committee. They have an interest in how the association is run, and we want the best for the association. So that's what we're trying to achieve and help with whatever experience we might have already.
So you mentioned that you're tower captain of 2 towers. Where would you consider as your home tower at the moment?
It's actually Langdon Hills. That's what's in the report. But Langdon Hills and Fobbing used to be run by Gordon Lucas. The 2 towers use the same ringers. So although we've got one set of ringers that could probably cope with 1 tower, I think Gordon branched out and decided that Fobbing and Langdon Hills could join together. So we alternate the practices and the ringing on Sunday, usually when we can ring, between those 2 towers. So 1 week, first, third and fifth Friday, it's at Fobbing, and second and fourth, it's at Langdon Hills. But it's the same people that go to both.
You get confused as to which one you're at this week?
Oh yeah, I always go to the wrong place and then realise, well, I know one's there, and then you have to go to the other one. So yeah, exactly. Even now, but we know the shortcuts between the 2. So it's, but yes, it does happen.
Can you remember how and where you started to learn to ring?
I learned to ring about the age of 11. It's all a bit approximate, and it was in Berkshire, a village called Wargrave, where some of my school friends, no, it wasn't school friends, it was people who lived next door to me and across the road type of thing, who used to disappear on a Wednesday night and I wondered what on earth where they all went. And I managed to tag along one week and to be discovered that, there's this strange thing that people are doing with bells and ropes and things, and really quite, unusual. And I thought, well, my friends are doing it, so let's give it a go. And there was a chap there called Harry Smith at Wargrave who was teaching about 6 of us all at once. And it was quite an experience looking back at it, knowing what we know now about how you teach people. He had us all ringing backstrokes in rounds, backstrokes only, just to get the timing right before we could do the hand strokes. So he didn't join the two together until we got the timing of each stroke, which I've never ever seen anywhere else. But I think he did quite a good job, because it's not until you look back at the person who was teaching you think, well, did he actually teach me well? And the answer is, well, he seems to be, because my hands seem to do the right thing, and I don't think I've got any obvious errors. But but I was only there for about a year, and after a year, we were moving house. So I moved down to Wimborne in Dorset on a Tuesday, because I know it was a Tuesday, because I knew that was their practice night, and we'd moved in on a Tuesday. And of course, being only 11 years old, you pester your mum and dad, can I go ringing tonight? No, we've only just moved in, was the answer. So the following week I went along, and I met up with the tower captain at the time, who actually originates from Essex. And so there's a link back here. So the tower captain is a man called Laurie Turner, who used to ring at Shenfield, and his father was the Harry Turner, who was, I've looked up this just today to check the dates, and he was Life Vice President as well. As I wasn't around in Essex in those times, I don't really remember what Harry actually did for the association. I know there's some history in the books, but he obviously did quite a lot to be of training. Certainly at Shenfield, you look in the records and see what he did. But this band in Wimborne really sort of took me from ringing rounds, that's all I could do, to really up to their service standard that they used to ring on a practice night or at the weekends, very, very quickly. And I learned so much within 3 years, that within 3 years I rang a quarter of Cambridge Royal after 3 years. Now, I've never ever learned at the same rate ever since. And you think, well, it's all downhill since then. But yeah, very, very grateful to all those people in Wimborne who taught me so much in such a short space of time.
So how else do you remember your early experiences of learning to ring?
A lot of people used to take me around because my parents didn't ring and everybody else. I was very much the first one in my family. And I remember that they used to take me on outings and to practices all over the place. That's how I got on, by either going out with these people and learning to ring. I used to cycle everywhere because the tower was within cycling distance. And I used to go out every night of the week at certain points to get experience, because it's not just about ringing in your own tower. This was about getting out and about. So I used to go out 4 or 5 times a week, homework permitting. So that's how I progressed in those early years, is by helping other people as well as myself. What
is it that you enjoy about ringing that makes you still carry on years later?
A few things that do it. One is the people. I think the people aspect is one thing. All right, some people you always like and get on with, and others you perhaps don't get on with. That happens in life in general. But it's the spread of different people that you meet through ringing, is that, it doesn't cut any mustard over where people are from, what their background is. It's what they can do in the tower, and hence what they can do socially as well. It's really quite a leveler, and that's, it means that going away on business or something, can walk in somewhere and be instantly talking the same language with other people that you've never met before. The other thing, of course, there is the technical aspect of it. Can I do all this complex stuff? Well, yeah, there is that. There's the challenge of learning things. There's always things to learn. It's a bit like music. I always compare that to, in that when you're learning something, there's always a new piece of music to learn. And it's the same with ringing. There's always something new, some newfangled method that someone's looked up and wants you to ring. So it gives you always something to look at. And then the flip side of that is actually seeing it from the other side of the fence. We've already mentioned how, people helped me when I was learning to ring. And actually, it's a huge encouragement to those of us that are teaching to actually see people progress. The way that people come on in their ringing ability, but knowing, watching people go from quite novice ringers to progress quickly or not so quickly, but at least when the light bulb moment goes off, you think, that made sense. Such that, some people talk in one way and, they might have heard the same thing said to them over the few weeks earlier. Someone else will come along in a different way, say it slightly differently, and that will twig and that will get them over that hurdle. So it's quite rewarding doing that.
So what's been your greatest ringing memory or achievement to date?
There's been some terrifying moments as well. Terrifying being that when you get invited to ring somewhere that is it's a rare opportunity to ring at. I was asked to go and ring by John Armstrong, who was ringer at Westminster Abbey and one of our Life Vice presidents in Essex as well before he passed away, to go and ring at Westminster Abbey with the Abbey ringers. And annoyingly, the first time he asked, I was going on holiday, and you just think, it's cancelled the holiday. But fortunately, he asked me again to go, and I went, and you meet at the gate. There's all these with the public outside the gate, and then they open the gate and the ringers go in. And it's one of the most terrifying moments I've ever had, is ringing there, not trying not to go wrong. Set your bell, strike the best you can, and on all the rest of it, because their standards are so high. Fortunately, some of the others went wrong, which made you feel a little bit easier. And then when it all comes round, you think, I've now got to set my bell. There's no pressure, So I think that was one of the most terrifying things from that perspective. Achievements, well, yeah, there's been some. I've been one of these people who set yourselves a target, like a bucket list of things I want to do, and then I'll have made it. And there's been a few that have been and gone that probably I couldn't repeat now without some serious practice. But, they're just landmarks I've set myself, because you give yourself a target to work towards. And so long as you've got the other ringers around you who can help you reach that target, it might be someone sets a target of they want to ring a particular method. There's various targets that people get set to push them, even in training. So they want to ring rounds without any help. But for me, it was probably a bit more complex than that. But it's the same principle, that you set yourself a target. Can you do it? Yes, no, try again. And there's been lots of failures along the way because you don't quite get there. But it's nothing new to new ringers that are starting out. That's what I'm trying to get at.
Do you have any stories of when it all went a bit wrong?
There was a very famous one at Writtle where we were supposed to be ringing a quarter of Plain Bob Caters, and Andrew Brewster will remind me quite frequently that I made such a mess up of this. I'm one of the more experienced people who shouldn't go wrong in Plain Bob anyway, and I managed to mess it up because there was something going on in the composition that I was trying to work out, and these calls appeared from nowhere, and I just totally lost it, and they fired it out. So this is when it was meant to be for someone else, so that was a rather nasty one. We also was going for appeal of silent non-conducted at Dagenham, when I used to go to Dagenham with John Armstrong. Silent non-conducted. Now, this is where you ring for appeal, where no one says anything, no one nods or helps anybody else at all. And I'd never done this before. And not only was it a appeal, it was a very difficult appeal, because you're ringing Norman Smith's 23 splice surprise major, silent non-conducted. And we got, normally appeal is 7 parts in length, and we got to the 6th part, and someone went wrong, and no one was allowed to say anything. So we crashed about, and eventually stood, and that was the end of that. So yes, quite a few failures.
You've mentioned a few names as you've talked about your early ringing years and some of the things you've been doing. Is there anyone that you would say was an influential ringer for you?
Laurie Turner was tower captain at Wimborne in the early years for me, and he took me from rounds. Now, I think the Quarter of Cambridge Royal in 3 years, it was his first at Cambridge Royal as well. So there was a band of people that moved in as well, that also had lots of experience. And I don't think there's any one particular in person, but Laurie was tower captain who was running the ringing at Wimborne. But there was lots of others around that time. There's a chap called Keith Fleming, who I'm still in touch with, and he actually came up to Chelmsford when the Archdeacon of Harlow, I think, came from Wimborne Minster, and some of the Wimborne ringers came up to ring at Chelmsford, and we rang a quarter at the Cathedral, and I've not seen Keith for years, so that was good to catch up. You don't realise how influential people are on you until years later.
You've mentioned you've rung at Westminster Abbey, and obviously you've rung lots of appeals. You've said that you're a Life Vice President for the Essex Association. Do you have any bell ringing goals or ambitions left? Anything else you want to achieve?
We've been trying to ring this peal of surprise minor that it's certainly been on my bucket list of things we wanted to do. Unfortunately, we haven't got there yet, despite umpteen different attempts. So it just shows you that, even though, there's various things that keep going wrong. So we go up for appeal, lose it. But, it's frustrating when things go wrong. We have some very good ringing, and then it all piles in a heap. That's still on the agenda to be done. We're still learning. At this point, even.
What would you say to other ringers to keep them infused, to keep them coming back, and maybe get involved in different aspects of ringing?
There's 2 types of ringers, I think. There's those that are quite happy with what they're doing, and they have no ambition to do any more. And I think that there's quite a number of ringers like that, where they're quite happy doing what they're doing on a Sunday, which gets the bells rung usually when we're ringing on Sundays, and they are quite happy with that. Then there's the other type of people that want to learn, that sometimes don't have the opportunity or the right environment for them to learn things. And I'm quite keen in trying to push that, because, if you want to learn something, we need to try and sort something out to allow you to do that. And often it's around just explaining rather than just expecting people to look at a book or a method and pick it up just like that. Sometimes people need different things explaining in different ways, and that's quite rewarding. We've done some quite crazy things at Langdon Hills, wanting to do new things. Gordon was always wanting to do new things. It was never rest on your laurels. It was always, we've got to do this, we've got to do that, and I'm quite keen to do that and see people progress. And that's what we've been trying to do in the district as well. But it's very hard if people don't want to come forward. If they don't want to come forward and say, I'd like to do X, Y, Z, how can you make them? And it's really somehow trying to work out the enthusiasm that I've got to put in them. And it's very, very difficult sometimes. Some people just don't want to know, and others do. We've had a few examples in our district of people who've really taken off since being encouraged. And I'm quite enthused by that. That's what we should have, particularly the younger ringers, because they're our future, as we know, and we want to encourage them as much as we can.
How would we go about getting more of that? What would you say to non-ringers to perhaps get them to come and have a go?
Yeah, that's always a tricky one, isn't it? It's the $64,000 question. Yeah, it's really hard. Trying to enthuse people to have a go. It's always difficult. I mean, I've never been in the situation where I've been able to do training during the week. I've always had a job which involved, a lot of commuting and everything else to get to work. So I've never been in the situation where I've been able to assist with any training. The people that you usually pick up are usually personal friends through contacts or through the church, or other people who have also found people through work. You do try and talk about these things. I certainly do, the work environment, and they can't believe the things you're looking at on squiggly lines on bits of paper, or what you're doing. Why are you looking at that? But, and sitting on a train learning methods, that was how I used to learn methods. Trying to enthuse people into this strange art that we all do, but it's so fascinating, and most people haven't got a clue about what we do. If you're able to get them to come along and take the bait, you've then got to take that forward, which is where I've always found it difficult.
Has there been anything that ringing has taught you that was unexpected?
I used to be very shy. I know you won't believe this. I used to be very shy, not doing, I'd rather sit back and let other people do things. I was very, very much like that. And I can honestly say that through the roles that I've had within the association, it's made me change the way, if you're a district officer or an association officer, you've got to be outgoing. So if you're running a practice, you've got to go and say, hello, who are you? My name's so-and-so, if you don't know them. And it's really, really hard to start with, because you think, oh, I really don't like doing this. But it's actually had an effect that I can honestly say that the thought of me now standing up in front of, hundreds of people and spouting off about something, I don't really care anymore, so long as I know what I'm talking about. So I think that's the only thing, you need to make sure you know what you're talking about. And of course, that's had a knock-on effect in my work environment, because originally I was sort of sitting back, not doing anything. But once you've got confidence, and that's all it is, it's just a confidence in, the ability to stand up and talk, hopefully about something you know about, has made a huge difference to my work environment as well.
A lot of transferable skills come from ringing, don't they, that you can take out into everyday life?
I think that one of the things that I think also I picked up, this actually came the other way around, in that, you go on these management courses and they do all these tests to check what type of person you are and what motivates you. You must have had all of this, and you're either the sort that you're one of these people who likes doing that, or you're the other one who says, yeah, I'll do it for you. And I'm actually in that category. So I'm in the one that, would bend over backwards to help other people. That's helpful, because it makes you appreciate that actually encouragement and improving things is also part of that skill, that you need to pass on this marvelous skill that we've got, and I'm enthusiastic about passing it on to others. So I think that's how that's come across.
You talked earlier that you were a district officer, you've been an association officer and all the rest of it. I also know that you have been a tutor on the Essex Ringing course for a number of years. Can you tell us a little bit about what the Essex Ringing course is, and why or what the role of being a tutor on the course entails? It
wasn't until I started getting involved in association, you find out that when you get elected as a district officer, you find out what's going on in the association. And one of the things, the event was this Essex Ringing course. Well, what on earth's that all about? And you go along initially as a helper to go and help and find out what the Essex Ringing course is all about. So I went for about 3 or 4 years as a helper, and you get rather tired, putting it mildly. You're doing all this ringing, all this talking, and helping other people, which, hang on, that's something I like doing. Eventually, I can't remember, I think it might have been Adrian Semkin, says, oh, perhaps you ought to be a tutor. Well, I don't know where that was picked up. I can't remember how it occurred now. But the tutors are responsible for running each of the groups. Now, the Essex Ringing course has about usually 12 or 13 groups. The groups are split by ability. So it might be the fundamental one where you're learning to handle. It could be you're ringing rounds for call changes. You're doing plain hunt. You're doing bob doubles. So the group is split into those abilities, and sometimes there's more than one group for each ability. And it's a bit of a task of the course organizer to sort out who's in what and where they're going. The tutors all meet and do a ballot over who they're going to be teaching and what they prefer to do. And then it's the role of the tutor to look after the group that they've got. So they'll usually have six or so students and an array of helpers to assist with that. The first challenge is to find out what you're supposed to be teaching them. That will be the first clue. Once you've found that out and you finally get a list of your people who are coming along, the initial role is to find out where they're up to. So usually there's a phone call involved or an email to the applicants that are going to be the students to find out where they're up to. And then once you've found out where they're up to, you then say, okay, well, what do you want to get out of the course? What do you want to find? What do you want to achieve? And there are some limitations, obviously. Some 3 days worth of ringing is not going to fix everything. But the idea is to sow some seeds and pointers into things they can pick up when they go back to their home towers. And it's also looking after the group as a whole. So where you're going to have lunch, very important in my regime. Where you're having lunch, where you're going, and what time you've got to be back, type of thing. And making sure that all of the helpers are aligned to where they're going, what they've got to learn, just in case there's some methods they've got to learn, and looking after the whole group, roughly, for 3 days, and then collapse on a late Saturday afternoon.
That must take an awful lot of preparation and thought, because obviously, delivering a training session over 3 days with a group of people you probably don't know and a group of helpers you might not be familiar with as well. I would imagine that takes an awful lot of preparation beforehand. You don't just turn up on day one and, off and running.
No, I agreed, but often, having been done it for a few years, you have the material from the previous years that you've already done. So if you've done certain groups, there's the material that you've had from that. Preparation-wise, it's really a case of knowing, not getting lost is a crucial one, particularly as it's in North Essex, North and North East Essex, which I'm not that familiar with, but I think over the years I've got there, so you get more familiar of where the towers are and where the pubs are. The preparation perhaps isn't as much as making sure you say the right thing. That some people will respond to the way you say things, the first time round, others won't. So you perhaps got to rethink how you explain the same thing in a different terminology. Also, it's a case of, I think what I quite get out of it is seeing where people are at, where they're up to, is what's their handling like. That's the first thing you always have, is a little bit of a critique on their handling, particularly if you're doing one of the more advanced groups. What is their handling like? And I quite enjoy looking at that and trying to work out what's wrong, if anything's wrong, or whether it's good, and giving that sort of feedback to the students, just to try and help them. We're not there to focus on handling perhaps, but it's just a little pointer to try and work out what they're seeing. And everybody as well thinks about ringing in different ways. Not the simple, what we might think of a classic example of doing plain hunt. A lot of people think about plain hunt in very different ways. And there's multiple right answers to that question.
With all of that going on then, what else do you do outside of ringing?
I haven't really got any other hobbies, if I'm totally honest. I studied chemistry at university at Imperial College. I've been working for the same company since I left university, just past the 34-year mark. A company called LGC, a government laboratory. I originally started as a chemist working in the lab, and I was looking at cigarette smoke. When I was smoking 100 cigarettes a day on a machine and seeing what's in the cigarette smoke. That's what I started off doing. But then you sort of see the light, and after about 10 years, I've had enough of lab work because it gets a bit boring, because laboratory work is very much routine. Unfortunately, it's only the exceptions that make things interesting. And I actually moved into IT after 10 years, and I've been there ever since. So I actually look after now all of the company's databases, big databases, across many continents now. The company's been privatized. We also have, I think it's 3,500 employees now. So I'm looking after these systems for the company, and that's what I do. Well, we have a family, taking children everywhere, off to university, back to university. That's wherever they want to go. I'm usually only out ringing once a night, normally during the week.
How would you juggle your ringing activities with the commitments of your daily life and your family?
Careful management of the boss's diary. There are certain dates in the calendar which is always ring-fenced. So all the association dates, all the district dates, were all in the diary for the following year anyway. So you had those in there because as a district officer or association officer, you're expected to be there. I'm very much a stickler on that. I've only ever missed one management meeting, and that was when I was nearly dying from flu. But every other one I've been there, and I'm very much a stickler on, if you're going to do something, then you should be there as much as you can to the best of your ability.
Okay, well, we're almost coming to the end. So, Steve, is there anything else that you'd like to share with us, ringing or otherwise, or any good stories that you think we ought to know about?
Well, the one thing you put a question down, but you haven't asked was about how did I get involved in the management of the association? Mm-hmm. And that is something that I was going to district events regularly, because when you start attending district events and someone picked up that perhaps I ought to be a district officer, it was then I got elected as deputy master. Hang on, that's where I am now, but that's a different story. I got a phone call out of the blue from Dickie Firminger, who I'd heard of, but didn't really know. Now, Dickie Firminger is based in Colchester, and he phoned up and said, we would like you to think about being nominated for Association Master. And apparently it was a Dickie and Bernard Fairhead double act, where they wanted me to go and have a chat about it, where they get the thumb screws out, went through all the details. Now, with hindsight, what you realise is both of those characters, who are sadly not with us anymore, were both life vice presidents, and they felt it was their responsibility to look after the association by finding suitable people from around the association. How on earth they got hold of my name, I don't know. I remember Dickie saying, "Well, I've got my contacts," he said. So I went to go and have a chat with Dickie and Bernard, and somehow I said, "Yeah, okay," and then not realising quite what you're taking on, of course. But I was very fortunate to be elected as master. We had some significant events coming up in the association's calendar. I was elected in 1998, and we had this small matter of the millennium coming up. You remember that one? And then we had another small matter of our 125th anniversary in 2004. So they said, well, you better hang on for that there. And that's what happened. It just sort of rolled into another. And actually, looking back on it, that was a great privilege to be in charge at those times. We had some great advertisement through, our ringing on January the 1st. It splattered all over the ringing world. Look what we did in Essex. We rang in every tower type of thing, and no one else seemed to. That was my take on it. And similarly with the anniversary, we had the Central Council visit, and one big faux pas I did at the Central Council dinner was introducing the Bishop of Colchester as the Bishop of Chelmsford, which went down hilariously. But you say these things. But yeah, that was one faux pas I did. But a great privilege to have done that. And yes, I did it for 10 years, but that's because of the continuity. And I thought I'd had enough after 10 years, so someone else can take over. But a great privilege to do that. And I think I've benefited from it as leading the association during those times. Great events that also wouldn't have been successful without all the members. The members are where all the work takes place. Just because someone's up there at the front saying who they are, and that's not the point. It's the ones that do all the work at the district level and lower, which is what makes up the association to be as good as it is. Tremendous privilege, and then to get life vice president, well, that's just on top of it, really. What I tend to find is after being master, I tried to take a role by sort of stepping back and deciding that perhaps I wouldn't do quite so many things. And then you found that, the thing with the Central Council reps came up and there was a gap. There was a vacancy. No one wanted to do it. Well, hang on, we're eligible for 5 reps to go along and we've only got 4. So guess who went for it? So I was Central Council rep for 9 years. So because, I feel it's very, very strongly, if we are eligible for do things, we should be doing it. And yes, I went to 9 Central Council meetings, great experience in doing that. And I know things have changed now with the restructuring, but, it was a great honour to do that. And the same with the district events that I've ended up being back on the district team, because I felt as though things weren't being pushed as much as they should have done or sorted out, and you had new people coming in to take in roles who needed some support, and that's really where I'm coming from. I don't want to be district master.
Thank you very much for joining us, Steve, and sharing with us your ringing career and some insights into what your world is like. Thank you very much.
Great. Okay, thanks a lot.